So in step 7, we wrote out an answer plan, a short list of bullet pointed answers. So here's an example of one right there. Step 8, we are now going to write out our answer in full using something called the P principle. So P principle stands for point, evidence, and explanation. Now this is not a NEBOSH technique or anything like that. It's not mandatory either, but NEBOSH have previously recommended it. It is a common academic technique which helps people write better essays, better answers, better paragraphs. The idea is that you've got a point that you're trying to make. So it's like write out your point clearly and concisely, then explain your point using evidence to support your point. In this case, we have a scenario, and so we're trying to use evidence from the scenario or references to the scenario or just phrase our answer in the context of the scenario to try and illustrate and explain the point that we are trying to make. Now, just to be clear, the examiner has something called a marking scheme or a mark scheme. That is a list of correct mark-worthy points, which if you mention, and so if you mention it and it's reasonably well explained and it's in the context of the scenario, you will get a mark for that point. If it's not on the marking scheme, then what you've said will not get a mark. Furthermore, if you have not explained it very well, or you haven't explained it clearly, or you just haven't explained it at all, it doesn't matter if it's on the mark scheme. You're still not going to get a mark. So you have to explain it. Furthermore, if you have not connected that to the scenario, then you are highly likely to not get the mark either. So here's the thing, you can mention all of the right things. You can even explain your point, but if it's just generic waffle verbiage, which is not in connection with the scenario, there's every chance that the examiner will not award the mark for it. And the examiner will just be shaking their head thinking, oh my goodness, you've got the right answer. Why couldn't you just connect it to the scenario? Show me you understand. Because why? Well, let's take a look at the exam paper. The exam paper says you've got to show understanding or a connection to the scenario. Right, so like connect it. This is why a lot of the questions say support your answer using relevant information from the scenario. Support your answer, relevant information from the scenario. Based on the scenario only. It's like they want you to write out that connection with the scenario. So just get into the habit of doing that every single time. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you an example of how we take that answer plan and write out full answers. Now, if you are a full Compassa student, I would like you to look on the left-hand side. You've got some more pages and more tutorials here where I give some other examples, where I bring it all together. I look at some unusual questions and we use the P principle to answer those. So please make sure you always check what's on the left-hand side because there might be more information. I don't want you to miss anything. If you are watching this on YouTube, and I'm afraid that you won't have access to that, you've just got this YouTube video. But if you were to become a full Compassa student, or if you just signed up for our exam preparation course, which is much cheaper, much lower cost, you'll get access to all of that information as well. So in the last step, we looked at a permit to work question and we wrote out this list. So let's remember, we are trying to write out a point, evidence, and explanation. And here I've written a list of points. Let's rephrase these points so they're a little bit clearer. So I'm going to say, it's good, there is a formal PTW procedure. Okay, that's my point. It's good that there's a formal PTW procedure. Now I want to write down some evidence here. So again, looking at the scenario, there's loads of evidence that there's a formal procedure. We've got forms, we've got signatures, we've got a person in charge. There's a process being followed here. It's good that there's a formal PTW procedure. We know this because of the forms, the signatures, and the permit to work issuer role. It's great. So I've got a point. I've added some evidence. Now I just want to put in a little bit of extra explanation. And my explanation, always link it back to the question if you can. I'm trying to comment on the factory's application of their permit to work system. I'm trying to express my opinion on whether they're doing permit to work well or badly. So it's good that there's a formal permit to work procedure in those courses of formal organizations which manage PTW well to start with a formal procedure. And if I were to shrink that down into a normal font size, let's say 12 or 11, all I've got is 2 to 3 lines. 2 to 3 lines. That's all I need, and that will get 1 mark. How many words is that? How many words? That is 33 words. 33 words. That's about right. I remember once being told that you need to write usually between 20 to 30 words to get a mark. That's not a rule, by the way. Yeah, please don't misunderstand me. Please don't misunderstand me. It's so easy to say things and then I've got people counting words. My goodness. No examiner is going to count the words. All right? It's just a bit of guidance. It's just to give you a guideline. It's like, have you written enough? Well, if you've written 20 to 30 words, there's a good chance there's enough detail in there. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's just 20, 30 words of nonsense. If you haven't written 20 to 30 words, there's a good chance that you haven't made your point and evidenced it and explained it. It's very difficult to make a point, evidence it and explain it in less than 20 words, unless you're a master of the English language. All right, so aim for 2 to 3 short lines, 20 to 30 words kind of thing. And that's about right. Let's write this point out in full. And the point will be this. So there's someone in charge. So there's a person in charge of the PTWs, the permit issuer. And actually, I've kind of made a point there already. So I'd just say, one positive is there is a person in charge of the permit to works, the permit issuer. And that permit to issuer is actually my evidence, the permit to issuer. I mean, if you could take it further if you want, I could say who is in the office. If you really want, you could add that just to make it absolutely clear. I'm referring to my scenario. Effective PTW systems have a trained and designated person to authorize PTWs. And again, if we shrink that down into normal font size, it's two lines and it's 32 words. Now, people misunderstand me sometimes. And actually, I think I caused NEBOSH a little bit of bother with this. Might be me, it might have been someone else, I don't know. But NEBOSH recently revised their scenario-based guidance and removed a whole section about the P principle, which caused a little bit of surprise amongst the NEBOSH community as to, oh, why did you take it out? Well, quite simply, it was because of people misunderstanding what they're expected to do. We had people who were doing this, and this is just stupid. It's like they were writing out point, evidence, explanation. And they were then doing this. So they thought they had to format it and structure the answer like this. And so, well, there's my point, and there's my evidence, and there's my explanation. They thought they had to do that. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. I mean, just silly. Do you really think the examiner's like box ticking? Like, no, don't do that. That's just contrived. It's just fake. It's not authentic. It's just write 2 to 3 lines like that. I apologize. If NEBOSH, if you're watching this, I'm really sorry. I hope it wasn't me that caused this problem. So that's what we're trying to do with each of these. Should we do one last one? Come on, let's just do one last one. Let's pick a different one. I'll go. There we go. This one. This is a nice juicy one. PTW is written in the office. No job location check. So again, it's abbreviated. So let's just write that out clearly. We can say the issuer. Let's start with our point. The point's a negative, isn't it? What is negative is the PTW issuer does not visit the location of the job to check the hazards or controls are in place. They write the PTW in the office. So I've got a point there. I've got a negative. That's maybe a little bit too wordy as a negative. Doesn't matter. And they write the PTWs in the office. And then I need a bit of extra explanation. I've got my point and evidence. I need some explanation. Let's just add a tiny bit more. Right, the PTWs in the office. Without that visit, it is impossible for them to properly identify hazards or check controls. That's probably a little bit too wordy, but that is okay. Let's just see what that looks like written out normally. It's, 2.5 lines. It's 47 words. Yeah, I've overdone it slightly, but that's fine. So that's what you need to do on each of those points. So I would expect to see on this whole answer, I've got 17 points. I want to see 2 to 3 lines on each. So it's quite a bit of writing. Now, some of you will be saying, what about the word count? What about it? What about it? At time of filming, this is what the exam instructions say. They say, you are not expected to write more than 3,000 words in total. That's not an absolute rule. You are not expected. Like, learn to read the English language here. It's like, it doesn't say you must not write more than 3,000 words in total, right? Because if it did, now, okay, that means it's an absolute word count limit. You must not exceed it. But here it doesn't say that. It says you are not expected to. And that is very, very different. NEBOSH is saying, listen, you can pass this in about 3,000 words. You don't have to overdo it. But here you are. Now, if you're my student, you'll know that I recommend that you write as much as you need to. There's no rule saying you can't write more. Most of our students are writing 4,500 to 5,000 words. Now, the examiner might resent marking something so long, but you know, that's the examiner's job, first of all. And secondly, if your answers are structured really well, like this, nice numbered bullet points with a very clear point, bit of evidence and a bit of explanation, that is so easy to mark. They're going to whiz through that very, very quickly, very easily. So a long paper, which is well structured, well written, using the P principle very clearly, that will be very easy and quick for them to mark. What is harder to mark might be a big jumbled mess of nonsense, which might be half the size, but it's still a big jumbled mess of nonsense. Let's just take a look at this, which was basically the answer we had before and a little bit extra. Straight, if I read that, it's like, I can't see where the points are. I can't see the evidence clearly. I can't see the explanation. It's very hard to mark. It says, it's good that there's a formal PTW procedure. Great. We know this because of the forms the signature PTW issuer role. One positive is there's a person in charge of the PTW as the permit issuer in the office. Effective PTW systems have a trained and designated person to authorize the PTWs. Great. So I can give a mark there. So let's highlight that. So that's green. I can give a mark there. I'd love to give a mark for this, but it hasn't been properly explained. What is negative is that the PTW issuer does not visit the location of the job control. Right, so we've got a whole thing there. That's worth a mark, I think. Organizations which manage PTW well must start with a formal procedure. All right, great. All right, so what? Oh, hang on. Isn't that kind of connected to what was said up here? Yeah, all right. So why didn't you just finish making your point? Oh, my goodness. What a jumbled mess. There's also a time limit and copies of the forms. Yes, there is. So what? So what? There's a time limit and copies of the form. Is that good? Is that bad? What's your point? That's just evidence. It's evidence just thrown in, but no point, no explanation. All right? So that's a bit of a mess. The form should be signed by all parties before proceeding. Like, yes, they should, but like, what's your point? Are they signed? The scenario says they're signed. But what does your answer say? It doesn't say they're signed. It just said they should be signed. So should be. Like, where's the explanation? Where's the evidence? That, my friends, is a jumbled mess. And you can have a 3,000 word exam paper of jumbled mess and it's super hard to mark. But if you have a 5,000 word exam paper that's written out with nice simple paragraphs like this, making a point, evidence, and explanation, the examiner should really thank you for it, or certainly I would. So I don't want you to worry about word counts, okay? There's a lot of chatter about this on the internet. Don't worry about the word count. If NEBOSH ever impose an absolute word count and it becomes a mandatory rule, I will let you know ASAP. I'll be shouting about it, all right? But until then, you just write as much as you feel you need to. But again, don't misunderstand me, okay? Because here's the thing, it's like, I say don't worry about the word count, but that does not give you carte blanche to write down any waffle you like. Try and write things that are relevant to the question. There's some people, especially on YouTube, they've misunderstood me on this, and they think, oh, well, we can write as much as we like. So they just copy and paste huge amounts of random content, dump it into the answer sheet. They just write anything thinking, oh, I might stumble upon a mark. And so you end up with 10,000 word exam papers and hardly any of it's relevant to the question. No, it's like, just because there's no limit on the word count doesn't mean you should just write anything you like. Try and answer the question. All right, the examiner will thank you for it. You will save time and save effort. Remember to check out the tutorials on the left-hand side of your screen. Obviously, if you're on YouTube, you don't have those, but full Compassa students, just check out everything on the left-hand side. And I'll see you in the next step, which is step 9.